Stop fat shaming. That expanding waistline is not your fault, expert says. Ooh, expert. Well, let's see who the expert is. Let's see what the study was, and let's see how legit it was. So this came out 2 days ago from CNN Health, so you know it's good. The head of the article says, stop blaming yourself for your expanding waistline. The food supply is working against you. Expert says. See, every time they sprinkle that on like a bit of seasoning, expert says, that's to reinforce that line into your head to think that whatever they say, if you're sure of what you say, don't always need to sprinkle it with expert says. So nutrition scientist Dr. Kevin Hall may not be a household name, but he's famous. He's one of the only researchers in the world to conduct not one, but 2 gold standard clinical trials on the impact of ultra-processed foods on the growing obesity crisis. It says here that during Hall's first clinical trial at the US National Institutes of Health, 20 healthy volunteers consumed 500 additional calories a day when they ate ultra-processed foods compared with when they ate meals from whole foods. In the second clinical trial, not yet published, convenient, it's not yet published, convenient, 36 volunteers ate an additional 1,000 calories a day when an ultra-processed food diet, according to a midpoint analysis of the data by Hall. He says these are the 2 most important experiments ever done on nutrition, not least because they were so rigorously controlled. The study subjects were essentially imprisoned and could not forget, lie or cheat about what they ate. Now, first of all, just because they say that doesn't mean that you can't be critical of that and question that. First of all, have they really imprisoned people? I mean, seriously, what trial is going to imprison someone for an X amount of time? Because weight loss takes quite a considerable amount of time to feed off, right? I mean, you're not going to see that stuff in sort of a quick turnaround. So what I would probably assume, and I'm just assuming here, but I'm using my logical cortex here, getting all technical. Probably what happened was Monday to Friday, they asked people to come in and they keep a close eye on them, say 9 to 5, or maybe in some extreme cases they stay over somewhere in a sort of a clinical kind of dorm lab sort of thing. But on the weekends to see family, they go home. Because it says more or less, right? It did say that, didn't it? Yeah, it said essentially imprisoned. There's room for that. And I guarantee when you go into the study, they had a weekend off. And that's where they could be fucked here. But we'll keep going. It says here that which foods spurred people to eat the most calories, they asked. Ultra-processed meals that were both energy dense, lots of calories per bite, and hyper palatable. Bet you can't eat just one. That's their slogan. Insights from the 2 studies, along with Hall's decades of research into low-fat, low-carb diets, the role of metabolism, and the weight loss success of contestants on The Biggest Loser, has led to his new book, Food Intelligence. I'm not going to promote his book. Go screw yourself, mate. You can pay for that. CNN spoke to Hall about nutritional myth busting and why he believes it's our food supply, not lack of willpower, that leads to overeating. Here we go. Let's get into the meat and gravy, potatoes and biscuits. CNN, right? Dr. Kevin Hall, forgive the pun, but people really do hunger for knowledge about nutrition. There's a lot of noise out there. No, he's right. Too often people in nutrition science fall into the trap of, we've got it all figured out. So they try out a new diet, low fat or low carb or supplements. Most nutritionists don't do that. They know anyway that a lot of that is bull. He says here, for example, for body fat, for example, it doesn't matter too much whether you're on a high carb, lower fat or low carb keto-like diet. Science has found the difference in body fat loss between the 2 minimal when diet calories are similar. Yet that doesn't stop the continuing argument between true believers in both camps. Now that is true. And again, he's sort of getting at the element of the basics of the overall calories are the main concern when it comes to weight loss. Now there's complexities in that. For example, carbohydrates with insulin sensitivity, that kind of thing. An increase of high fats may help your regulatory renal gland system of producing of hormones, might produce more free testosterone, which will promote more fat loss. There is complexities, but essentially that is true. It is essentially a case of just simple calories in, calories out. So they ask him, CNN, why do you say our food environment is to blame for our ever-expanding waistline? Hall says that the food intake is biologically controlled phenomena. Our food choices are guided by environmental and social cues, integrated with an internal symphony of hormonal and neural signals. An orchestra all conducted by the brain, yet we are consciously aware of that process. Now that is true. It is true. Now, we're beginning to see that our food environment can disrupt those signals in ways that we can only begin to understand. For example, signals from the gut to the brain might disrupt when nutrients in ultra-processed foods are paired with some additives. It's true that some people have been very successful at making changes in their lifestyle leading to weight loss. Now, that's a key. Remember what he said when he says that. However, when you're faced with a food environment that is stacking the deck against you, it makes it so much more difficult to make the right choices. I hope people realize this is not their fault. And this is the bullshit point. This is the bullshit point. Because on one hand he says, well, he skims over it. It's true that some people, have lost weight, changing exercises. But, the fact of it is, it's actually the ultra-processed foods, because when you eat those, it makes you want to eat more. And it's actually the ultra-processed foods. Well, see, those people that change the lifestyle, they also ate ultra-processed foods at one point. That's the point. And this is the thing that he sort of skims over lightly. They would have ate ultra-processed foods at one point. It's not like just obese people, they go to a supermarket and it's jumped down their throat. Everyone has ate them. So one camp of people have decided to make the change, and another camp of people have decided not to make the change. So there's deeper psychological issues here. There's psychological issues of meaning, purpose, aiming for a higher, better, rejecting mediocrity, aiming for a better, higher power of yourself, that kind of thing. Not just to say, that ultra-processed food you're eating, that's actually what's stacking the cards against you. Coupled from the fact that it's a heap of other things as well. We don't socially eat together as much anymore. We eat too fast, which messes up the leptin signals in the brain that tells us when we're full, when we're eating fast, that kind of thing. And also the study as well here, it takes into consideration that, people that eat ultra-processed food versus people that eat whole foods, those different rates of, calories burnt. It doesn't really negate the fact as well that, again, so many more complexities at hand, like genetic dispositions where some people's metabolism systems are just so fast that it doesn't really matter what they do. They'll burn their NEAT expenditure just when they're sitting down. What they're naturally burning can be sometimes 2 to 3 times higher the rate. We don't know what the control study group was. Was it taking more muscular people, more people that was naturally obese, genetically dispositioned to that? We don't really know. So it's kind of really messy just to say, it's not your fault, it's the food industry's fault. There is science that suggests that indeed some people clearly experience something very much like an addiction from ultra-processed foods, and we already have reasonable evidence that diets high in ultra-processed foods are likely harmful to health. We know this. People get addicted to shit all the time. Now we have new science that suggests we overeat ultra-processed foods mainly because they are energy dense and they are formulated with nutrient combinations that are defined as hyperpalatable. The overall prevailing narrative here, again, like always with all these things, is to shift blame or responsibility away from the user or the obese person themselves. I'm personally not a fan of society that does this, because a strong society should, in my opinion, adapt the Stoic approach. Self-responsibility. Take responsibility for your own actions. Understand that it's your choices and your choices alone. Yes, at every turn it's going to be much more difficult. There's fast foods at every corner. There is ultra-processed foods. There's nice foods. There's sugary foods. And they can be very addictive. And I get that. Weight loss is hard. And anyone that's tried it, I put my hat off to you. Well done. And I really do respect you for actually taking the higher ground, rejecting mediocrity, actually getting up and doing something. It's great. That's hard work. Well done. However, it's your responsibility to do that, and you got here in the first place. Regardless of potential genetic dispositions, environmental factors, at the end of the day, you need to take responsibility. And these kind of articles and these kind of new liberal ways of thinking is always trying to pass the blame to something else. It's the system's fault. It's the rich's fault. It's the corporation's fault. It's actually the food industry's fault. It's not my fault. Take some fucking responsibility for yourself. And if you're ready to take some responsibility for yourself, I have tons of videos over in the channel to help you. Nutrition videos, training videos, tips on weight loss, everything you can imagine. Head over there and check. And don't forget to like and subscribe. But until the next time works, I'll catch you then.